Have you ever had a passion, something that felt like it was woven into the very fabric of your soul, that your own family looked at like it was a pile of literal garbage? For me, that wasn't a metaphor. For the last 10 years, my passion was, in their eyes, a pile of garbage. And the story I'm about to tell you is about what happens when your family finally decides to take out the trash, only to discover they've just thrown away a winning lottery ticket. If you've ever felt misunderstood by the people who are supposed to love you most, if you've ever had to fight for your dream, then you're in the right place. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because you're going to want to see how this one ends. My name is Alara, but everyone calls me Eli, and for as long as I can remember, I've been a collector of forgotten things. While other kids were playing with dolls, I was collecting rusted bolts, old clock gears, and strange, twisted pieces of metal I found near the railroad tracks. I didn't see junk. I saw stories. I saw shapes. I saw a silent industrial beauty in the things the world had discarded. As I got older, that passion evolved. I learned how to weld. I learned about metallurgy, and I started to build. My studio was the left side of my parents' immaculate 2-car garage in suburban Ohio. And when I say immaculate, I mean you could have performed surgery on the floor. My father, Frank, was a certified public accountant. His entire world revolved around neat columns, balanced ledgers, and predictable outcomes. My mother, Susan, was a homemaker of terrifying precision. Her Tupperware was cataloged, her spice rack was alphabetized, and her greatest enemy was dust. And then there was my corner. My corner was a chaotic, beautiful, organized mess. It was a dragon's hoard of metal. There were twisted pipes I'd salvaged from a demolished factory, sheets of copper I'd aged with vinegar and salt, gears from old farm equipment, and buckets of bolts, springs, and strange industrial detritus. In the center of it all was my welding station. This was where I brought my creatures to life. My sculptures weren't pretty. They weren't the kind of thing you'd see in a dentist's office. They were weird. As my mother so frequently pointed out, they were skeletal, biomechanical things. A life-sized horse forged from tractor parts and rebar. Its mane a cascade of rusted bicycle chains. A flock of birds with bodies of polished chrome and wings made from the blades of old lawnmowers. A haunting, 7-foot-tall figure called the Watcher, made from a discarded furnace and 1,000 tiny clockwork pieces. They were my children, and to my family, they were just junk. I just don't understand it, Alara, my father would say, shaking his head as he carefully maneuvered his pristine sedan around my metal horse. He wasn't mean about it. He was just bewildered. There's no ROI. What's the return on investment for a pile of rusty chains? It's art, Dad, I'd say for the 100th time. Art is a hobby, sweetie, my mom would chime in, wiping a smudge of grease off the wall with a sigh. A career is something that comes with a 401k, like your brother, Mark. He's a lawyer. Now that's a real job. Ah, yes, my brother, Mark, the golden child. He had followed the pre-approved life script: good college, law school, junior partner at a firm downtown. He was a success. He was normal. He parked his sensible, successful car on the right side of the garage. I, the artist, was the variable they couldn't account for, the unbalanced line on their perfect family ledger. For years, I lived with it. I paid for my own materials with the money I made from my part-time job at a local library. I tried to keep my chaos contained to my corner. I endured the constant loving concern, the lectures about stability, the not-so-subtle job listings for paralegal positions left on the kitchen counter. I put up with it because I loved them, and because a part of me, a small, insecure part, wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe I was just a girl playing with junk in a garage. The beginning of the end started with a grease stain. I had been working late on a new piece, a series of metallic flowers with petals made from sharpened trowels. The work was intense, and I'd been using a heavy-duty lubricant for one of the old gears. A small amount had leaked onto the pristine, gray-painted concrete floor. I hadn't noticed it, but of course, my father did. Alara, he called out the next morning. His voice had the sharp, accusatory tone he usually reserved for a miscalculated tax deduction. Get out here, please. I walked into the garage, and he was standing there, pointing a trembling finger at a dark, greasy spot on the floor about the size of a dinner plate. It was 3 feet away from his beloved ride-on lawnmower. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. "This is epoxy resin. Isn't it? I've told you 1,000 times to put down a tarp. Do you have any idea what it will cost to get this professionally removed?" This is exactly what I was talking about. My mother appeared in the doorway behind him, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked at the stain, then at my corner of the garage, and her face set into a mask of pure, unadulterated frustration. It was the final straw that broke the back of her perfectly organized camel. "That's it, Frank," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. I'm done. I'm done with this. This isn't a studio. It's a junkyard. It's a fire hazard and a mess. And I want it gone." "Mom, it's not a junkyard," I said, my own frustration rising. "It's my work." "It's junk, Alara," she snapped, her voice finally rising. "It's pieces of garbage you drag home. Our neighbors think we're running a scrap metal business. The garden club is coming over for tea next week. Am I supposed to show them this? It's embarrassing. It's time for you to grow up. It's time for you to get a real job, a real life. And it is time for us to have our garage back, so we can, park our second car in it." The sheer suburban absurdity of it all hit me. My life's work, my passion, my very soul laid bare in metal and sweat, was less important than a parking spot for their second car. "Art doesn't pay the bills, Alara," my father said, siding with her, as he always did. "It doesn't come with health insurance. We love you, honey, but we cannot continue to subsidize this hobby. We're not getting any younger. You need a plan for your future." Subsidize, the word hit me like a slap. I had never asked them for a dime. I paid for my own welding gas, my own metal, my own tools. I worked 40 hours a week at the library to fund my passion. The only thing they were subsidizing me with was free rent and a daily dose of disapproval, and I was suddenly, deeply, profoundly done with it. I looked at my father, the man of numbers and logic. I looked at my mother, the woman of order and appearances. They were good people. They loved me, in their own limited, conditional way. But they would never, ever understand me. And I realized, in that moment, that I couldn't spend one more day of my life trying to make them. A strange calm washed over me. The anger just dissolved. "You're right," I said quietly. They both stopped, surprised by my sudden agreement. "I do need a plan," I continued, my voice steady. "And I have one. My plan is to move out." The look on their faces was a mixture of shock and, if I'm being honest, a little bit of relief. This was the outcome they had been pushing for. "After all, I've been saving up," I lied. "I'll find my own studio space, a place where I can work without worrying about the floor. I'll be out by the end of the month." That night, after the tense, silent dinner that followed, I went out to the garage, my sanctuary, my junkyard. I ran my hand over the cool, rough surface of the Watcher. I looked at my horse made of chains and my birds made of blades. They weren't junk. They were pieces of me. They were the stories I couldn't put into words. They saw a pile of garbage. I saw a family of strange, beautiful creatures I had brought into the world, and I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in my bones, that I had to get them out. I had to find a place where they, and I, could finally breathe. A place where we would be seen for what we really were. I had no idea just how soon, and how publicly, that was about to happen. The days following my announcement were strange. The open arguments stopped, but they were replaced by something far worse, a thick, pitying silence. My parents started treating me like a terminally ill patient they were trying to make comfortable in her final days. My decision to move out wasn't seen as a step toward independence. It was seen as the final, sad symptom of my terminal failure. My mother would make me my favorite meals, her eyes full of a sorrow that had nothing to do with me leaving and everything to do with where she thought I was going. My father stopped talking about the ROI of my art and just started sighing a lot. He'd watch me out in the garage, carefully wrapping a small sculpture in bubble wrap, and he'd just stand there at the door, shaking his head slowly before walking away. You know the look I'm talking about. Right, that disappointed but I love you anyway look that parents are masters of. I'd been getting that look my entire adult life, but now it was laced with a new ingredient: resignation. They had finally given up on me. And the most messed up part, a small part of me was relieved. Their disapproval had been a heavy weight, but their pity felt lighter. It was the freedom that comes from having absolutely no expectations to live up to anymore. So, I focused on the task at hand, packing up my dream. And I think, for you guys to really understand what happened next, you need to understand what they threw away. You need to meet my children. I wish you could have seen them. They weren't just piles of metal. They had souls. First, there was the Watcher. He was my oldest, my first truly ambitious piece. He stood 7 feet tall, his body forged from the rusted, hulking shell of an old cast-iron furnace I'd found in a derelict factory. His head was a complex sphere of interlocking clock gears, brass cogs, and delicate watch springs. I'd spent months collecting and assembling. He didn't have a face, not really, but depending on how the light hit the intricate machinery, you could almost see expressions shifting in the shadows. His long, slender arms were made from gracefully curved copper pipes, and his hands were delicate things I'd woven from thin copper wire, with fingers that looked like they could conduct a symphony. He represented time, memory, the ghost of the industrial age. He was the silent keeper of forgotten stories. My parents called him the rusty robot. Then there was my iron horse. This one was pure power. It was a life-size stallion, reared up on its hind legs, ready to charge. I'd built its powerful chest and torso from the engine block of an old John Deere tractor. Its legs were thick. Industrial rebar I'd bent and welded into submission. Its neck was a beautiful, powerful curve of steel, I-beam, and its mane and tail, my favorite part, were a wild, cascading river of hundreds of rusted, intertwined bicycle chains that clanked and chimed softly whenever there was a breeze. It was about resilience. It was about taking things that were designed to be useful and mundane tools of labor and turning them into something untamable and beautiful. It was about the wild spirit hidden inside the machine. My mom called it that tetanus hazard. And finally, there was Icarus. He was my newest and my most personal piece. He was a life-size figure of a man, more abstract than the others, welded from sheets of polished, stainless steel so he shone in the light. But his wings were another story. They were enormous, magnificent, and terrifying. They were made from hundreds of jagged, sharp-edged blades from old, broken lawnmowers and scythes I'd collected from farms. They were all angles and sharp points, beautiful but undeniably dangerous. He was captured in mid-fall, his body arcing towards the ground, but his face was tilted up towards the sky, not in terror, but in ecstasy. He was about the beauty of ambition, the glory of aiming too high and falling spectacularly. The idea that it's better to burn out than to fade away. To me, he was a symbol of every artist who ever dared to create something new. To my brother, Mark, on his last visit, he was a lawsuit waiting to happen. These were not just sculptures. They were pieces of my life, my sweat, my blood from countless cuts and scrapes. My frustration and my joy were welded into every joint, and as I began the painstaking process of figuring out how to move them, the weight of what I was doing, and the weight of my family's disapproval, felt heavier than ever. It was during this time, as I was wrapping one of Icarus's sharp-edged feathers in thick foam, that I let my mind drift back a few months. You know how sometimes you do something incredibly brave, something that feels like you're leaping off a cliff into the dark, and you send it out into the universe, and all you hear back is deafening silence. That was me, 3 months ago. My old art history professor from college, Dr. Alistair Finch, was one of the few people who had always believed in my work. He came to see my garage studio once. He didn't see junk. He didn't see a tetanus hazard. He walked around my sculptures for almost an hour in complete silence, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then he looked at me, his eyes bright with an intensity that I hadn't seen from anyone else, and said, "Alara, this is important work. It's raw, it's primal, it's brilliant. You need to show this to the world." He was the one who told me about the grant, the National Museum of Contemporary Art, the NMCA. Basically, the holy grail for any living artist had an annual Emerging Voices grant. It was incredibly prestigious. The winner got a substantial cash prize. But more importantly, they got a solo exhibition in the museum's new artist gallery. It was the kind of opportunity that could launch a career into the stratosphere. It was a complete and total long shot. They get thousands of applications. Alistair, I'd told him, from people with MFAs from Yale. I'm a girl who makes horses out of tractor parts in her dad's garage. Exactly, he'd said with a smile. You're not making the same safe, boring art as everyone else. That's why you have a chance. Send them the portfolio. Eli, the worst they can do is say no. So I did. I spent 2 weeks taking professional-grade photographs of my work. A process that involved renting special lighting and turning the garage into a photo studio. Much to my mother's horror, all these bright flashes. You'll short out the garage door opener. I wrote and rewrote my artist's statement 100 times, trying to articulate what my metal creatures meant to me. And then, one night, with my heart pounding and a feeling of complete and utter insanity, I paid the application fee online and hit submit. And then, nothing. Not a rejection email. Not a confirmation that they'd received it. Just absolute, crushing silence. Weeks turned into months. The submission deadline passed. The date they were supposed to announce the winner came and went. I checked my email, my spam folder, 12 times a day. Nothing. The silence was a fertile ground for my own self-doubt to grow. I had taken my shot. I had put my soul out there for judgment by the highest authority in the art world. And their response was to not even bother sending a form letter rejection. The silence felt like their verdict. It was confirmation of what my family had been telling me all along. My work, my passion, was worthless. A hobby. Junk. I eventually gave up hope and tried to forget I'd ever even applied. It was just another secret failure to add to my collection. Now, packing up that same work, the silence from the museum felt like a ghost in the room. It was the background music to my father's sighs. He came into the garage as I was trying to build a custom wooden crate for one of my smaller pieces. He watched me struggle with a power drill for a minute. You know, he said, in his most practical CPA voice, I got a quote from a moving company, the one Mark used, to move these things to that studio you rented. They said because of the weight and the unusual shapes, they'd have to charge a special handling fee. It's going to be over $3,000. Alara, he just let the number hang in the air. $3,000, a number that, to him, was a tangible, quantifiable measure of my foolishness. I know, Dad, I said, not looking at him. I'll handle it. With what he asked. The question genuinely curious. Your library job, honey. This is what I'm talking about. This isn't a sustainable path. You're spending a fortune just to move things that will never make you a fortune. I finally looked up at him, my patience worn thin. It's not about making a fortune. Dad, it's about making art. It's what I do. It's who I am. He just shook his head, that familiar, pitying look on his face. Okay, sweetie, it's your money. I just hate to see you waste it. He turned and went back into the house, leaving me alone with the screech of the power drill and the weight of his disapproval. By the end of the week, I had managed to pack or crate all of the smaller pieces. They were stacked against the wall, labeled and ready. The big three, the Watcher, the Iron Horse, and Icarus remained. They were too big, too heavy for me to handle alone. The professional art movers were scheduled to come on Saturday, the day after I was officially set to move into my new place, on Thursday night. The day before my move, I stood in the garage for the last time. It was quiet. The big three stood like silent sentinels in the dim light, their metal bodies cool to the touch. I ran my hand over the bicycle chain mane of the horse. I looked into the clockwork face of the Watcher. I traced the sharp, dangerous edge of Icarus's wing. I was leaving, finally. But it didn't feel like the triumphant escape I had imagined. The silence from the museum, combined with my father's final, pitying words about wasting my money, had done their damage. I felt a profound sense of uncertainty. Was I really an artist, or was I just a foolish girl with a welder and a garage full of junk? About to spend $3,000, I didn't really have to move my delusions from one place to another. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that I had to try. These creatures, these pieces of my soul, deserved a chance, even if I wasn't sure I did myself. I'll be back for you on Saturday, I whispered to them, to the quiet, dusty air. We're almost there. I turned off the garage light, closed the door to the house, and went upstairs to pack my last suitcase, completely unaware that it was the last time I would ever see them standing there. Friday morning, the day of the move, I woke up with a feeling I hadn't had in a long time, a genuine, buzzing, unmistakable flicker of hope. For the first time, my future felt like a wide-open space instead of a narrow, pre-approved hallway in my parents' house. Today was the day I was signing the lease on my new studio, my own space, a place where my art, and by extension, I could exist without apology. I practically floated through my morning coffee. My dad had already left for work at his accounting firm, and my mom was busy in the kitchen, humming. The tension from our argument a few days ago had dissipated, replaced by the awkward politeness of people who have agreed to disagree. They thought I was making a huge mistake, but at least I was finally moving out and making it somewhere else. Big day today, sweetie, my mom said, placing a plate of toast in front of me. It is, I said, a real smile on my face. I'm meeting the landlord at noon to get the keys. That's wonderful, she said, and for a second, I thought I saw a glimmer of real warmth in her eyes. While you're out, your father and I are going to do a little tidying up here. Give the garage a good sweep before the movers come for your things. Tomorrow. Oh, okay, thanks, Mom, I said, my heart lifting a little, a peace offering. A good sweep sounded nice. It sounded supportive, maybe, just maybe. They were finally starting to accept it. That little ember of hope warmed me all the way downtown. I met the landlord, a burly, bearded guy named Gus, at the entrance to an old brick warehouse in the city's burgeoning arts district. He led me up a rattling freight elevator to the 3rd floor. He slid open a heavy metal door, and my breath caught in my throat. It was perfect. It was a massive, open-plan loft with soaring ceilings, huge industrial windows that flooded the space with northern light, and worn, paint-splattered wooden floors. It had character. It had history. It had space. I could see it all in my head, my welding station over there, the Iron Horse here, Icarus catching the morning light by that huge window. It was a cathedral for my weird, beautiful, metal children. So, what do you think? Gus asked, grinning. I'll take it, I said, probably a little too eagerly. I signed the lease, handed him the first month's rent and security deposit, a painful chunk of my library job savings, and he placed a set of heavy, old-fashioned keys in my hand. They felt like the keys to a kingdom. My kingdom. I spent the next hour just walking around the empty space, planning, dreaming. I felt light. I felt free. I felt like an artist. I drove home late that afternoon, floating on a cloud of newfound optimism. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe this was a clean break, a fresh start for all of us. I pulled into the driveway, the keys to my new life feeling heavy and significant in my pocket. I decided I'd go to the garage first, to grab some packing tape and start on the last few boxes in my room. I pushed open the door that led from the kitchen to the garage. Mom, I'm home. I got the words died in my throat. The garage was clean, and I don't mean a little tidied up. I mean it was spotless. The floor, the same concrete floor that had been perpetually covered in a fine layer of metal dust and grease, was now a uniform, sterile gray. It smelled sharp, like bleach and industrial cleaner. My welding station was gone, my tools were gone, my buckets of salvaged materials were gone. And the corner, my corner, was empty. The watcher was gone. The Iron Horse was gone. Icarus, with his magnificent, terrifying wings, was gone. You guys. I can't even begin to describe the feeling. It was like the air had been sucked out of my lungs, out of the entire universe. It was a physical punch to the gut. The world narrowed to a silent, screaming tunnel. The keys I was holding slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the pristine concrete floor, the sound echoing in the cavernous, horrifying emptiness. What do you think? My mother's voice came from behind me. I turned slowly. She was standing there, beaming, wiping her hands on a dish towel. My father was right behind her, a proud, satisfied smile on his face. We did it, she announced, her voice full of cheerful accomplishment. Your father and I decided to give you a big moving out present. We did you a favor. We cleaned up all that All that scrap metal for you. I just stared at her. My brain was refusing to process her words. Scrap metal. Cleaned up. The city's bulk trash pickup was today, my father chimed in, looking incredibly pleased with himself. It was perfect timing. We got everything out to the curb this morning. They took it all. See? We saved you that $3,000 for the movers. Now you can use that money for something sensible, like a new sofa for your apartment. He thought he was helping me. He thought he had just given me a gift of $3,000. He had no idea he had just taken my life's work, my entire soul, and thrown it into the back of a garbage truck. I finally found my voice. It was a strangled whisper. What did you do? We cleaned up, sweetie, my mother said, her smile starting to falter as she finally registered the look of absolute horror on my face. We got rid of all that junk, so you could have a fresh start. Junk, I whispered. You threw them away. Of course we did, my father said, his voice laced with impatience, as if I were a particularly slow child. We told you we were tired of it. It's for the best. Alara, a clean break. The watcher, I asked, my voice starting to tremble. The iron horse, you put them on the curb. Oh, for heaven's sake, stop being so dramatic, Brenda said, her voice turning sharp. Yes, you guys. I'm calling her Brenda now, because in that moment, she stopped being my mother. It was a pile of rust. Alara. It was dangerous. We did what any loving parents would do. We helped you get rid of a problem you couldn't get rid of yourself. And that was it. The dam broke. The grief. The rage. The years of being invalidated and dismissed. It all came roaring out of me in a sound that was half scream, half sob. It wasn't a problem, I shrieked. The sound tearing from my throat. It was my art. It was my life. It was everything you didn't clean up. You destroyed me. I was sobbing now. Great, heaving, ugly sobs. I sank to my knees on the cold, clean floor where my art used to be. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound. I felt like I was physically breaking apart. Alara, stop at this instant, my father commanded, his face turning red with anger. You are being hysterical over nothing. It was garbage. We live here, too. And we have a right to not live in a junkyard. I was leaving, I cried, looking up at him through my tears. I was moving it tomorrow. It was all arranged. I just wanted one more night. The look on their faces told me everything. They knew. This wasn't a case of miscommunication. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. They had done it on purpose. They had seen their window the day before the movers were scheduled, and they had taken it. It was their final act of control. Their final, definitive statement on the value of my life's passion. It was worthless. It was trash. And the worst part, the part that will haunt me forever, was the look in my father's eyes. It wasn't just anger, it was relief. He was relieved that the problem, the messy, inconvenient, artistic daughter problem, was finally solved. He had chosen his wife's pristine garage over his daughter's soul. I have to ask, you guys, what's the one thing you could never forgive? Because I think I found mine that day. On my knees on that cold concrete floor. I stopped crying. A sudden, terrifying calm washed over me. I slowly got to my feet. I looked at my parents, at their defensive, angry, uncomprehending faces. And I knew there was nothing left to say. You can't reason with people who refuse to see you. You can't explain the value of art to people who only see junk. I walked past them without a word. Alara, where are you going? We're not done talking about this, my father called after me. I didn't answer. I walked through the kitchen, into the foyer where my suitcase was still standing. I picked it up. I picked up my purse. I walked to the front door. I paused with my hand on the doorknob and looked back at them. They were standing in the doorway to the garage, looking utterly bewildered by my silence, by my ingratitude. The movers are canceled, I guess, I said, my voice flat and dead. You were right. You saved me $3,000. And I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't slam it. It was a quiet, final click, the sound of an ending. I got into my car and drove away, my vision blurred by a fresh wave of tears. My life's work was gone. My home was gone. My family, for all intents and purposes, was gone. I had never, in my entire life, felt so completely and utterly alone. I drove for hours. I had no destination. I just drove. The city lights blurring into long, watercolor streaks through my tear-filled eyes. The keys to my new studio felt like a lead weight in my pocket. A cruel joke. A kingdom with no king, no subjects, nothing but empty space. I had a place to put my art, but I no longer had any art to put in it. Eventually, as the sky began to bleed from black to a bruised purple, I found myself in the arts district, parked in front of the old brick warehouse, my new home. I used the heavy key to let myself into the building, rode the rattling freight elevator up to the third floor in a state of complete emotional detachment, and slid open the heavy metal door to my loft. The space was exactly as I had left it hours before, vast, empty, and full of potential, but the potential I had seen then, the glorious future of a working artist, now felt like a mockery. The huge industrial windows that had promised me beautiful northern light now just looked out onto a cold, indifferent city. The echo of my own footsteps on the paint-splattered wooden floors sounded accusatory. The space wasn't full of promise anymore. It was just empty. A perfect, hollow reflection of how I felt inside. I dropped my suitcase and my purse in the middle of the floor and just stood there. You guys, have you ever felt a grief so profound it feels like you've become untethered from your own body, like you're watching yourself from a great distance, a character in a sad movie, and you can't feel anything at all? That was me, numb. The shock had formed a protective cocoon around my heart, and I was just floating in the silence. But numbness doesn't last. It's just the deep breath before the scream. The scream, when it came, wasn't loud. It was a raw, ragged sound that tore from my throat. A sound of pure animal pain, and with it, the numbness shattered, and the anger flooded in. It was a hot, white-hot rage. I looked at my own hands, the hands that had learned to weld and shape and build, and I wanted to destroy something. I kicked one of the heavy brick walls, the impact jarring my whole body, a satisfying, stupid flare of pain shooting up my leg. It wasn't enough. I started pacing the empty loft like a caged animal, the words of my parents replaying in my head on a torturous loop. It was junk. Alara, a tetanus hazard. We did you a favor, it's for the best. It's just a pile of rust. They didn't just throw away my sculptures. They threw away my identity. They looked at the things I had poured my entire soul into, the physical manifestations of my hopes and fears and stories. And they had seen garbage. And the worst part, the part that truly broke me, was that they did it because they thought they were helping. They did it out of love, a twisted, controlling, invalidating kind of love that demanded I conform to their definition of a worthwhile life. Their act wasn't just a betrayal. It was an indictment of my entire existence. They were telling me that who I was, at my very core, was wrong, that I needed to be cleaned up, swept out, and discarded with the trash. Have you ever felt so completely misunderstood, so invalidated by someone, that you start to doubt your own reality? You start to wonder, am I the crazy one? Was it all just junk? That was the next stage of my grief. The anger burned itself out, leaving behind the toxic ash of self-doubt. I sank to the floor in the middle of the empty room, my back against a cold brick pillar. Maybe they were right. What was I? After all, a 20-something woman with a useless art degree and a part-time library job, living in her parents' garage. My brother was a lawyer. My friends had real careers, mortgages, engagements, and I had piles of scrap metal. I had submitted my work to the most prestigious museum in the country and had been met with complete and utter silence. Wasn't that the ultimate proof? The professional art world had ignored me, and my own family saw my work as garbage. Who was I to think it was anything more? The thought was a poison, seeping into every part of me. The artist I thought I was, the one with a unique vision, began to dissolve, replaced by the image my parents had always held of me, a foolish, delusional girl playing with junk, a failure. I must have sat there for hours as the sun came up, the gray morning light filling the loft. I felt hollowed out, exhausted. The adrenaline was gone, the anger was gone, the tears were gone. All that was left was a vast, empty sadness. Eventually, I made myself move. I went down to my car and brought up a single box, the one marked personal. Inside was my life, separate from the sculptures, my journals, my favorite books, my welding gloves, and my sketch pads. I sat on the floor and opened the most recent one. I flipped through the pages. There were the initial, frantic sketches for Icarus, the detailed drawings of the clockwork mechanism for the Watcher's head, page after page of my ideas, my process. And then I came to a finished charcoal drawing of the iron horse. I had spent days on it, trying to capture the way the light hit the bicycle chainmain. Looking at it now, my heart just broke. It was a drawing of a ghost, a detailed, loving portrait of something that no longer existed, something that had been carted off to a landfill like a broken dishwasher. And in that moment of pure despair, I thought, what's the point? What was the point of sketching, of dreaming, of creating, if the world just saw it as trash? What was the point of being an artist if your own family, the people who were supposed to be your first and most loyal patrons, were the ones who threw your art away? I held the sketchbook in my hands. It felt heavy, full of failed ideas and dead dreams. And I thought about throwing it away. I thought about taking the box, with all my journals and my gloves and my history, and taking it down to the dumpster behind the warehouse. A clean break, as my father would say. A fresh start. I could go get a real job. I could become the daughter they always wanted. I could be normal. The thought was both horrifying and, in my exhausted state, strangely seductive. What gets you through your darkest moments when you feel like giving up on your dream? What's the one thing that keeps you going for me, that day? I think I was ready to let it all go. I was ready to surrender. I was holding the sketchbook, my fingers tightening on the spine, about to close it for the last time. And then my phone, which I'd left in my purse, buzzed on the floor beside me. I ignored it. It was probably my mother, calling to see if I had calmed down yet. But it buzzed again, a text message. I glanced at the screen, expecting to see her name. But it wasn't her. It was a number I didn't recognize. But the name attached to it made my breath catch in my throat. Alistair Finch, my old professor. We hadn't spoken in months, not since I told him I was submitting the NMCA application. My hands trembling, I unlocked the phone and read the message. Alara, was just thinking about you and your magnificent iron horse this morning. The world needs to see your work. Don't you dare give up. Alistair. It was so random, so out of the blue, it felt like a message from another universe. A universe where my work wasn't junk, where my passion wasn't a problem to be solved. A universe where my art was magnificent. I stared at the words on the screen. Don't you dare give up. And I started to cry again. But these were different tears. They weren't tears of rage or grief. They were tears of a fragile, flickering, and utterly exhausted hope. It wasn't a solution. It didn't bring my sculptures back. It didn't fix my broken heart or my broken family. But it was something. It was a single, steady hand reaching out in the darkness. It was a whisper in the overwhelming silence, telling me I wasn't crazy. It was a reason to not throw my sketchbook in the trash. And on the longest night of my life, a single reason was just enough. The sun rose on Friday morning, my official moving day. It streamed through the huge, dusty windows of my new loft, painting long, lonely rectangles of light on the empty wooden floor. I had spent the night on a makeshift bed of blankets, drifting in and out of a shallow, restless sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the clean, sterile emptiness of my parents' garage. Every time I woke, the reality of it crashed down on me all over again. They were gone, all of them. The Watcher, the horse, Icarus, my family, gone. Dr. Finch's text message was a tiny, flickering candle in the vast, crushing darkness of my despair. Don't you dare give up. It was the only reason I had gotten out of bed, the only reason I was mechanically trying to create some semblance of a new life. I brought the few boxes of my personal belongings up from my car. The sight of them, so small and insignificant in the cavernous space, was a joke. This loft was meant to be filled with giants of welded steel and rusted iron. Now, it was just me, a few boxes of books, and the echoing ghost of my life's work. I sat on the floor, my back against the cold brick wall, and stared at my phone. It had been silent all morning. No angry calls from my father, no tearful, manipulative texts from my mother. It was as if, by throwing my art away, they had thrown me away, too. They had finally washed their hands of their difficult, disappointing daughter, in a strange way. The silence was both a relief and a confirmation of my worthlessness. And then, around 10 a.m., the phone rang. It was an unknown number with a Manhattan area code. My first thought was that it was my dad, calling from his office phone to try a new angle of attack. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the decline button. I didn't have the energy for another fight, for another lecture, but on the third ring, I let out a weary sigh and answered, my voice flat and dead. "Hello," a woman's voice responded. It was crisp, professional, and radiated a kind of effortless authority. "Hello, am I speaking with Ilara Chen?" She used my formal name, my artist name. No one ever called me Ilara except for Dr. Finch. "This is she," I said, a flicker of curiosity piercing through my grief. "Good morning, Miss Chen. My name is Dr. Anya Sharma. I'm the Director of Contemporary Acquisitions at the National Museum of Contemporary Art." "Okay, can we just pause here for a second?" The director of the NMCA, on my phone. My first, immediate thought was that it was a prank. A very, very cruel prank. Maybe my brother Mark had put one of his paralegal friends up to it. A final twist of the knife to mock my failed ambitions. "I'm sorry. Who did you say you were?" I asked, my voice laced with suspicion. Dr. Sharma chuckled. A dry, pleasant sound. "I know this call is entirely out of the blue. Ms. Chen, I assure you, it's quite real. I'm calling regarding the portfolio you submitted for our Emerging Voices grant several months ago." My heart stopped. The museum, the application I had given up on, the one whose silence I had interpreted as the final verdict on my worthlessness. "I must apologize for the extreme delay in our response," she continued, her voice all business. "Our final committee review was unusually long and contentious this year. There was a great deal of passionate debate." I was still silent, my mind unable to process this. I was trying to find the joke. "Ms. Chen, are you still there?" "Yes," I croaked. "Yes, I'm here." "Good," she said. "Well, I won't beat around the bush. Your work? It's extraordinary. That's the only word for it. The committee was, and I do not use this word lightly, Ms. Chen, blown away. I think I stopped breathing. The world tilted. Your use of reclaimed industrial materials is not just a gimmick. It's a profound commentary on memory, industry, and the soul of discarded things. The emotional depth you manage to convey through cold, hard steel is unlike anything we've seen from an emerging artist in a very long time. It's raw, it's powerful, and it's completely, unapologetically authentic." Tears started to well up in my eyes. The words I had been starving to hear my entire life, the validation I had craved from my family, were being delivered to me by a stranger on the phone, a titan of the art world. It was too much. "We get thousands of submissions, Ms. Chen," she went on. "Most of it is safe, derivative, academic. Your work has a soul, a fierce, wild, and beautiful soul." I made a small, choked sound. "Which is why," she said, her voice bright with excitement, "on behalf of the board and the Acquisitions Committee, I am absolutely delighted to officially offer you the 2025 Emerging Voices grant." The grant came with a $50,000 prize, enough to fund my work for years. "And," she added, as if that wasn't enough to completely shatter my reality, "it also comes with a solo exhibition in our main new artist gallery, the fall season. We'd like to open in October." I literally dropped my phone. It clattered onto the wooden floor. I scrambled to pick it up, my hands shaking violently. I'm sorry," I stammered. I dropped the phone. "Did you say a solo exhibition?" "I did," she laughed. "Are you interested?" "Interested," my voice cracked. "Dr. Sharma, I don't know what to say. Yes, my God. Yes, thank you so much." The tears were streaming down my face now, but for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. They were tears of joy. It was real. They had seen me, my work, my soul, Someone had finally seen it. Wonderful, she said. We are so thrilled. Our curator is already working on a preliminary layout for the gallery space, which brings me to the second part of my call. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, trying to pull myself together. There's more. There is. As part of the the museum has a budget to acquire one or more pieces from the winning artist for our permanent collection. And my acquisitions team, Miss Chen. Well, they fell in love. They were adamant. They felt that to truly represent the power and scope of your vision, we needed to acquire a triptych of your most significant works. My heart swelled with a pride so fierce it almost hurt. My children, my metal family, they were going to have a home in the most important museum in the country. The committee has approved a substantial offer, she continued, to acquire 3 pieces from your portfolio. Specifically, we would like to purchase the Watcher, the Iron Horse, and the piece you titled Icarus. And just like that, the beautiful, soaring dream collided with the cold, hard, concrete reality of a city landfill. The joy in my chest vanished, replaced by a wave of ice-cold panic so intense it made me nauseous. The air left my lungs again. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. No, 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 no. It was the cruelest joke the universe could possibly play. It was a miracle and a curse delivered in the same breath. The greatest opportunity of my life was tied to 3 masterpieces that no longer existed. Ms. Chen, Dr. Sharma's voice brought me back. Are you there? Did you hear me? My mind was racing, a frantic, desperate scramble for a lifeline. I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Dr. Sharma," but my parents, in a fit of misguided tidiness, threw your desired acquisitions into a garbage truck yesterday. My apologies. My career would be over before it even began. I needed time. I needed to lie. Yes, I said, my voice coming out an octave too high. I cleared my throat, trying to sound professional. Yes, I'm here. Forgive me, I'm completely overwhelmed. That's an incredible honor. We think they are incredible pieces, she said warmly. They will be the centerpiece of the exhibition. So, the final question is, are the pieces available for our team to assess? We'd like to send our logistics and conservation crew to your studio as soon as possible to plan for their transport to the museum. The panic was a physical thing now, clawing at my throat, my studio, my empty, cavernous studio. I had to think of something, anything. Yes, of course, they're available, I stammered, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. Absolutely, it's just, you've caught me at a bit of a chaotic time. As I mentioned in my application, I'm in the middle of a studio move. Today, actually, everything is everywhere. The larger pieces are currently being prepped for transport by my own movers. They're already crated. It was a weak lie, but it was the only one I had. Oh, of course, a studio move. How exciting, she said. Completely buying it. I understand completely. The last thing you need is our crew underfoot. Tell you what, you get settled in your new space. Take the weekend. Give me a call on Monday, and we can coordinate the logistics then. Does that work for you? Yes, I breathed, a wave of temporary relief making me dizzy. Yes, Monday is perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma, for everything. The pleasure is all ours. Mrs. Chen, we believe you are a major new voice in contemporary sculpture. Welcome to the NMCA. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up the phone. I stood there in the echoing silence of my empty loft. The keys to the kingdom had just been placed in my hand, a solo exhibition, a permanent collection, the dream, everything I had ever wanted. And the price of admission was a scavenger hunt in a landfill. I was no longer grieving. I was no longer sad or angry or numb. I was filled with a singular, terrifying, and wildly desperate purpose. I looked at the keys to my car, lying on the floor where I'd dropped them. The race was on. I had until Monday to achieve the impossible. I had to find my art. I had to pull my future back from the trash. For about 10 minutes after I hung up the phone with Dr. Sharma, I just sat on the floor of my empty loft, my mind a blank, white screen of static. The emotional whiplash was too severe. I had gone from the absolute bottom, the deepest pit of despair I had ever known, to the highest peak of professional validation I could have ever dreamed of. All in the space of a single 5-minute phone call. My body was thrumming with a strange, frantic energy. It was the volatile, unstable chemical reaction of pure elation mixed with pure, gut-wrenching terror. The exhibition was real, the grant was real, the museum's interest was real, and my sculptures were gone. The thought cut through the static like a bolt of lightning. The grief, the despair that was a luxury I could no longer afford. The sadness was a heavy blanket I had to throw off. It was being replaced by a surge of adrenaline so potent it made my vision sharpen. I was no longer a grieving daughter. I was a project manager on the most important deadline of my life. I had a problem to solve, and the timeline was Monday morning. I stood up, my movements sharp and jerky. I grabbed my purse and my car keys. I had to go back. I had to go back to the house I had sworn I would never set foot in again. I had to face the two people who had just annihilated my life's work. But this time, I wasn't going there to cry or to fight about feelings. I was going there for logistics. You guys? Have you ever had to confront someone who has hurt you beyond measure? Not with emotion, but with the cold, hard necessity of a crisis. It's a strange, empowering, and terrifying feeling. I wasn't going back there as their daughter. I was going back there as a woman whose entire future was sitting in the back of a garbage truck. And they were the only two people on earth who knew which one. The drive back to my parents' house was a blur. I broke every speed limit. When I pulled into their driveway, I didn't even turn the car off. I vaulted out and pounded on the front door. My father opened it, his face a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "Alara, what on earth are you doing back here?" I pushed past him into the foyer. "Where's Brenda?" I demanded. "She's in the kitchen," he said, frowning. "What is going on with you?" I stormed into the kitchen. My mother was at the counter, humming and arranging flowers in a vase, the vase that now sat on a new, modern end table where the corner of my piano used to be. She looked up, startled. "Lily, you're back. Did you forget something?" "Yes," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I forgot to get the details of the apocalypse you two unleashed in the garage yesterday. I need the name of the sanitation company you called. I need the exact time they picked up my work. I need to know which municipal landfill or waste transfer station your route services. Now." They both just stared at me. My father found his voice first. "What in God's name are you talking about?" "It was the city's bulk trash pickup. It's gone." "Alara, we told you. You need to let this go." "I can't let it go," I said, my voice rising, the adrenaline making it sharp as glass. "Something has happened. A complication. It is imperative that I locate those items immediately." "A complication," Brenda scoffed, crossing her arms. "What complication? Did one of your little art friends decide they wanted a piece of scrap metal for their own junkyard?" I looked her dead in the eye. The calm I had been fighting to maintain finally snapped. "The director of the National Museum of Contemporary Art called me this morning." I let the words hang in the air. Their smug, annoyed expressions didn't change. The name meant nothing to them. "They are offering me the Emerging Voices grant," I continued, my voice low and trembling with a rage that was almost ecstatic. "They are offering me a solo exhibition in their main gallery this fall. And they have just made a formal, 6-figure offer to acquire 3 specific pieces for their permanent collection." I paused, letting them absorb the first part of the shockwave. My father's jaw went slack. My mother's eyes widened. "They want the Watcher," I said, my voice a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. "They want the Iron Horse, and they want Icarus." I took a step closer to them. "The pieces you put on the curb yesterday morning like a bag of garbage. So, I am going to ask you one more time, where is my art?" The reaction was everything I could have imagined and more. My mother's face went completely white. She actually stumbled backwards, grabbing the counter for support. The social implications hit her first. Her daughter, her failure of a daughter, was about to have a solo show at the NMCA. And she, Susan, had just thrown the art in the trash. The humiliation, the sheer social horror of it, was written all over her face. My father's reaction was different. It was slower, more cerebral. He was a numbers man. I could literally see him doing the math in his head. Art, acquired by a national museum, 6 figures. The movers cost $3,000. What have I done? His face went from white to a sickly shade of green. He looked like he was going to be physically ill. "Oh my God," he whispered, sinking into a kitchen chair. "Oh my God, Frank!" My mother sobbed. "What did we do?" "I told you what you did," I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. "Now, fix it. The phone? Now. Call the town. Call the sanitation department. Find out where that truck went." My father, galvanized by pure, panicked guilt, fumbled for his phone. He, the man who couldn't be bothered to defend his daughter's passion, was now a man possessed. I listened as he barked into the phone, using his sharp, authoritative CPA voice, demanding information, pulling strings, name-dropping some guy he knew on the town council. After 10 minutes of frantic, escalating conversation, he hung up, his face ashen. "Okay," he said, his voice shaky. "Okay. The route supervisor said our truck's last stop of the day is the Harrison Waste Transfer Station over by the industrial park. Everything from the truck gets dumped onto a tipping floor and then pushed into a hydraulic compactor." "When does the compactor run?" I demanded. "They run it when the floor is full." He said the truck just arrived. It could be an hour. It could be 10 minutes. There was no more discussion. The three of us ran out of the house and piled into my father's Lexus. The car ride was the most awkward, tense, and silent 20 minutes of my life. My mother was openly weeping in the passenger seat, muttering, "I thought I was helping. I just thought I was helping." My father was gripping the steering wheel, his face a grim mask of self-recrimination, and I was in the back seat, staring out the window, a cold, hard knot of terror in my stomach. This was it, a race against a garbage compactor for my entire future. The Harrison Waste Transfer Station was a circle of hell. It was a vast, chaotic landscape of concrete and steel, dominated by mountains of trash. The air was thick with the foul, sweet smell of decay, and the sky was black with screaming seagulls. A giant front loader was roaring back and forth, its massive bucket shoving rivers of garbage towards a huge, menacing machine in the back, the compactor. My dad screeched to a halt in front of a small office. We all jumped out. A burly foreman in a hard hat came out, an annoyed look on his face. "This is a restricted area. You can't be here." My father, a man used to people deferring to him, tried to pull rank. "My name is Frank Chen. I am a taxpayer in this." The foreman just laughed. "I don't care if you're the president. Get your car out of here before it gets crushed." My mother started sobbing again. "Please, sir. There's been a terrible mistake. My daughter's, her things. They're in there." The foreman just shook his head. "Lady, everything in there is things. It's all trash. Now beat it." He was turning to walk away. We had seconds. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran in front of him, blocking his path. "My sculptures," I yelled, my voice cracking. "They're my sculptures. They're going to be in a museum. We have to get them back." He stopped. He looked at me, at my wild, desperate eyes, at my tear-streaked face. He looked at my well-dressed, panicked parents. He looked at the mountain of trash, and he let out a long, weary sigh. "You got 5 minutes," he grunted. 5 minutes. Then that compactor starts, with or without you, and if you get hurt, it's on you. I saw nothing. We clear. "Clear," I said, already running. "Alara, wait," my father yelled, running after me, my mother stumbling behind him. We ran onto the tipping floor. It was a nightmare. A vast, disgusting landscape of broken furniture, black garbage bags, and soggy cardboard. And somewhere in that mountain of filth was my art. "What do they look like?" my father yelled over the roar of the machinery. "Metal," I screamed back. "One looks like a horse. One is a tall, thin man. One has wings." My parents, in their clean, suburban weekend clothes, looked at the sea of garbage with horror. But then they looked at me, at the sheer, desperate determination on my face, and for the first time, propelled by their staggering guilt, they started to dig. My mother, with her perfectly manicured nails, was tearing open garbage bags. My father, in his expensive loafers, was shoving aside broken chairs and old mattresses. We were a frantic, insane team of dumpster divers, fighting against the clock. "Over there," I screamed. Pointing, I saw it. A glint of rusted metal, a familiar curve of a bicycle chain. It was the Iron Horse, half buried under a pile of wet drywall. We scrambled towards it. It was impossibly heavy. Dad, help me. Together, we managed to drag it, scraping and groaning, away from the main pile. It was scratched. It was dented. It was covered in something I didn't want to identify, but it was whole. Just then, a loud, blaring horn sounded across the yard. The foreman was shouting, waving at us. "Time's up, get out of there. We're starting the ram." My heart stopped. Icarus and the Watcher were still in there. "No," I screamed, and without thinking, I scrambled up the side of the trash mountain, slipping on the wet, unstable garbage. "Alara, get down from there," my father yelled. But I had seen it. The tip of one of Icarus's sharp, metal wings, sticking out from under a pile of blue tarps. He was right at the edge of the pit leading to the compactor. I slid down the other side. Landing hard, I grabbed the wing and pulled with all my might. It wouldn't budge. Just then, the giant metal plate of the compactor began to move with a terrifying, low groan. "Dad," I shrieked. He and my mother scrambled over to me, together. The three of us pulled. The sculpture shifted, then slid free, just as the compactor began its massive, crushing push. We dragged Icarus away. His wings were bent, and his polished steel body was deeply scratched. But he was saved. The last one, I gasped, my lungs burning. The tall, thin one. We scanned the pile frantically. There my mother screamed. Pointing, it was the Watcher, lying on its side, its clockwork head miraculously intact. We dragged it free just as the foreman and two other workers came running over, yelling at us to get out. We stood there, in the middle of the disgusting, stinking waste station, panting, covered in filth. My parents looked at me, their faces a mixture of exhaustion, guilt, and a dawning, horrified awe, and surrounding us, like wounded, resurrected soldiers, were my three sculptures. They were dented, they were scratched, they were covered in garbage, but they were magnificent, and they were mine. We stood there in the filth and the stench of the waste transfer station, a strange, silent tableau under the harsh industrial lights. Me, my father, and my mother, all of us covered in grime, flanking the three wounded soldiers I had just pulled from the battlefield. The iron horse had a deep, ugly gash across its flank. One of Icarus's magnificent, sharp-edged wings was bent at an unnatural angle. The Watcher, my wise old man, had a dent in his clockwork face, as if he'd been struck. They were scarred, they were damaged, but they were home. The ride back to my parents' house was a mausoleum on wheels. The silence was heavier than any of my sculptures. My mother kept dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, leaving little gray streaks on her cheeks. My father just stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his face a grim mask of guilt. He was the first to speak, his voice hoarse as we pulled into their pristine driveway. "Alara, I am so sorry. I had no idea. We had no idea. We can get them fixed." "Right, honey," my mother chimed in, her voice desperate and pleading. "We can hire the best people, metalworkers, restorers. We can make them look brand new again. So the museum, so they'll still want them." And there it was. That single sentence laid their motivations bare. Her first thought wasn't about the violation, about the pain they had caused me. Her first thought was about the opportunity. Her concern wasn't for my desecrated art. It was for the potential loss of a winning lottery ticket that they had. In their ignorance, tossed in the trash. She wasn't mourning my work. She was mourning the loss of the prestige, the money, the glorious story she could tell at her next garden club meeting. Oh yes, my daughter, Alara, the artist. The National Museum just acquired her work. You know, I looked at them in the rearview mirror, and I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a profound, weary sadness. They would never, ever get it. When we got back to the house, I didn't go inside. I stood on the driveway as my dad, with a pained grunt, helped me unload the smaller pieces we'd managed to fit in the trunk. The professional art movers, the ones I had canceled in a fit of despair yesterday, were scheduled to arrive for the big pieces in an hour. I had called them from the landfill, my voice shaking but firm, and rehired them on the spot. "Lily, please," my mother said, stepping towards me. "Let's go inside. We can talk about this. We can fix this." "No," I said. my voice quiet but unshakable. There's nothing to talk about. The time for talking was yesterday, when you told me my life's work was junk. I looked at my father. You didn't see any value in these pieces when they were just mine, filling your garage. The only thing that changed your mind was a phone call from a fancy museum. That's not a change of heart. That's a change in calculation. I took a deep breath. This was the hardest part. The final boundary. I appreciate your help today. I do. I couldn't have gotten them out of there without you. But this doesn't erase what happened. You broke my trust, and I need space. A lot of space. I pulled the keys to my new loft out of my pocket. I'm moving out today, as planned. I said, the movers will take the sculptures directly from here to a restoration specialist. After that, they will go to my new studio. You can come and see them, if you like, at the museum, at the opening in October. I turned to walk to my car. My mother started to sob. So that's it? You're just leaving? I stopped and looked back at them one last time, standing in the doorway of the house I grew up in. You threw my soul in the garbage, I said, my voice soft but clear. I'm just going to get it back. Goodbye. 6 months later, the opening night of my exhibition was a blur of bright lights, clinking glasses, and the low, respectful murmur of the New York art world. The main new artist gallery at the NMCA was a vast, white space with soaring ceilings, and in the center of it, my beautiful scarred children stood under the warm glow of the spotlights. I had made a decision with the art restorer. We stabilized the pieces, reinforced the bent wings and dented frames. But we didn't erase the scars. The gash on the iron horse's flank, the crooked angle of Icarus's wing, the dent in the watcher's face, we kept them all. The damage was part of their story now. It was a testament to their resilience. It was proof that they had been to hell and back, just like me. The title of the exhibition, suggested by Dr. Sharma herself, was Scrap Metal, a Resurrection. I stood in the corner, just watching people interact with my work. They would walk around them slowly, their faces full of awe and curiosity. They would lean in to look at the intricate clockwork, the cascade of bicycle chains. They saw it. They saw the story, the power, the beauty. They saw what my family never could. Next to each sculpture was a small, neat placard. Icarus, welded steel, reclaimed lawnmower blades, municipal landfill scraps. I had insisted on that last part. I saw them across the room, my parents. They looked so out of place in the trendy, artistic crowd. My father was wearing an ill-fitting suit, and my mother was clutching her purse like a life raft. They were keeping their distance, looking proud and terrified all at once. Our relationship was polite. We spoke on the phone once a week. The conversations were stilted, careful. They were trying, in their own clumsy way, to understand. They would never understand the art, but they were beginning to understand the consequences. They were guests at my triumph, not its hosts, and the difference was everything. We made eye contact. I gave them a small, civil nod. My father nodded back, a look of profound, complicated regret in his eyes. It was enough for now. Dr. Finch, my old professor, came up and wrapped me in a huge hug. I told you, Alara, he whispered in my ear, his eyes shining. I told you the world needed to see this. Dr. Sharma joined us, a glass of champagne in her hand. They are magnificent, Ms. Chen, she said. The story behind them, their journey from the landfill to this gallery. It's made them even more powerful. You should be incredibly proud. And I looked around the crowded room, at the people looking at my art, at my scarred, beautiful, resilient sculptures standing so proudly in the light. And I felt a sense of peace, so deep. It was like the quiet at the center of the earth. I didn't need their approval to be an artist. I didn't need their permission to be who I was. Their validation, when it finally came, was meaningless because it was for the wrong reasons. The only validation that ever truly mattered was my own. The world can call your passion junk. Your family can call it a waste of time. But if it sets your soul on fire, it is precious. It is your truth. So, this is for all of you out there, the ones with the weird hobbies, the unconventional dreams, the passions that don't fit into a neat little box. Your work, your art, your story, it has value. Even if no one else on earth can see it, especially if no one else can see it. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you belong in the trash. Your worth isn't determined by who throws you away. It's determined by your own willingness to dig yourself out, scars and all, and demand your place in the light. Thank you guys so much for listening. This was a hard one to tell, but it was important. If you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, I want to hear about it in the comments. Your stories are a powerful reminder that none of us are alone in our weird, beautiful corners of the garage. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. And until next time, go out there and build something beautiful, even if it's just for you.